We need to enjoy those last Timbits because it's time to head back to LA. We're wearing the same outfits that we wore on the flight to Toronto, washed of course. We're catching the 6:30 flight from Toronto to LA. And just as it was when we arrived, the airport was fairly empty. We're heading back to LA after 6 weeks in Toronto, and at this point, only travelers are allowed inside the airport, so we had to say our goodbyes outside. If you haven't already, check out our first video of our flight from LA to Toronto. We were originally scheduled to fly back to LA on September 1st, but our flight got canceled, so we switched to August 31st. This happened somewhere around mid-August, and basically what happened was Air Canada reduced the number of direct flights flying from Toronto to LA. The airport was pretty empty, as you can see, and all we had to do was drop off our bags, so that was a very smooth and quick process. Because this was an early evening flight, our experience was fairly different from our morning flight from LA to Toronto. In LA, if you remember from the video, our temperatures were checked before we boarded the plane, but in Toronto, they checked our temperatures before we entered security check. Seeing customs this empty was an incredible sight. And as usual, Leah was looking for everything pink. The only shops that seemed to be open were the duty-free store, the relay store, along with a few places to eat. And before we knew it, it was time to board the plane. This time around, we decided to bring the girls some distraction toys, something that was plastic and easy to clean. At this point, it was about 6 p.m. and our flight was scheduled to depart at 6:30. At first it seemed like the flight was fairly empty, but then the seats started to fill up a bit, so I would say that this flight was about 20 to 30% full. For this flight, for some reason, we weren't able to check in online ourselves, so we contacted Air Canada and they were able to select our seats and we were able to check in the morning of the flight. This time, we were given our Queen Care packs as we sat down. This pack included headsets, 2 wipes, a bottle of hand sanitizer, a bottle of water, a mask, 2 gloves, and some pretzels. And just like our flight from LA to Toronto, I made sure to sanitize every square inch of our 2 rows, including all of the screens, the windows, the walls, everything. Before we took off, we actually had to play a little musical chairs with our seating to ensure that we had at least 1 row empty in front and behind us. And then we were off. On this flight, the girls seemed a lot more interested in looking out the window. We had the girls both wear seat bands on both wrists to avoid anyone from feeling nauseous. And screen time is key on flights with toddlers. This flight surprisingly had drink service, and the drinks available were coffee, tea, water, Coke, Sprite, and ginger ale. About an hour into the flight, I had to bring out the iPad. Leah's screen actually stopped working, and thankfully we had 2 rows to ourselves, so she had 6 screens that she could choose from. She eventually decided that she wanted to sit with Nivea. And then an hour before we landed, she decided she wanted a snack, so she went back and sat with her daddy. And then we arrived home. We noticed as we were getting ready to exit the plane that there were suddenly quite a few people that had face shields on top of their masks. Our bags came out pretty quickly because Daddy had to go and pick up the car. We normally wouldn't park and fly for a trip that's more than 2 weeks, but because of COVID, we decided it was our safest option. Finally, back in our car and ready to go home. It's been 2 weeks since we arrived, and even though the girls were super spoiled in Toronto, they are still sweet as maple syrup.